German politicians and celebrities joined a media campaign against Pegida, a group protesting against what it sees as the Islamization of Europe. This comes after supporters and opponents of the patriotic Europeans against the Islamization of the West, also known as Pegida, hit the streets in record numbers. German cities last night turned the lights off of famous landmarks as part of a growing backlash against the anti-immigrant protests that have gripped the country recently. Suad Ahmed has more.
Germany's Cologne Cathedral was plunged into darkness last night as lights were switched off in a protest against extremism. Just one of several events protesting against the anti-Islam marches organized by Pegida. Thousands marched in Berlin, Cologne, Dresden and Stuttgart. But despite counter-demonstrations across the country and a recent plea from German Chancellor Angela Merkel to take a strident approach towards dealing with xenophobia, the eastern city of Dresden saw their biggest march yet. In the birthplace of Pegida movement, 18,000 of their supporters marched through the city center as the lights were turned off in the protest, chanting together, "We are the people." In recent months, the rapidly expanding Pegida movement has grabbed headlines, pushing the issue of immigration in Germany into the limelight. While the Dresden weekly rallies have consistently grown, elsewhere in the country, counter-demonstrators outnumbered the regional Pegida supporters. Here in the German capital Berlin, some 300 anti-Islamization protesters were met with 5,000 counter-demonstrators marching with flags from the main left-wing parties. And in Cologne, there were 10 times as many counter-demonstrators as protesters.
I think they're just as wrong as those in Dresden. I think there are lots of people going along with it in good faith, but I'm concerned that the core of the movement has bad intentions, and that's why I'm here.
Germany has some of the world's most liberal asylum rules, partly due to its Nazi past. This year alone, the number of refugees arriving to Germany surged to 200,000. However, in recent months, anti-immigration parties began capitalizing on voters' disenchantment with economic austerity, surging in popularity in a number of European countries, including Germany. But despite the growing support of the Pegida movement, counter-demonstrations have sprung up across the country, with demonstrations like this one provoking a debate in Germany that many say can no longer be ignored.
Now, to discuss this issue with us further is political activist Weyman Bennet, who joins us over the phone. Weyman, thank you very much for joining the bulletin. Now, at the moment, the protests are just that, protests. But when will it become a problem for Germany? Do you foresee this movement developing into more than just protests?
We do have a problem in Europe of the three groups. We have open Nazis, as in the NPD or Euro-fascists. We have people like the EDL or the Pegida movement taking to the streets who are blaming Muslims for austerity. And we also have other racist groups taken to them. The problem we have is when these groups grow and become, start to influence political views, you have a shift, I believe, in terms of accepting racism and Islamophobia as being normal. So if we look at UKIP in this country, we've seen that they've started to allow racist language, like they wanted to call Chinese people chinkies, or they've stigmatized Muslims. I think the danger of these movements is that in the end, these movements end up doing racist murders. I mean, at the end of the day, the movement of Enoch Powell led to the killings of Stephen Lawrence, Rory Dougal, and what we have to do is to make sure that these movements do not find themselves expressed in political parties getting office.
Yeah, now specifically about the Pegida movement in Germany, we've seen support for them, and we've seen support for Pegida and anti-Pegida gradually grow exponentially. I mean, week by week, both sides are growing. I mean, what does this mean for German society as a whole? I mean, is immigration, the issue of immigration, breaking the core of German society?
I believe that scapegoating and blaming immigrants has become a feature of all European societies, including Germany. The question is, if there's an austerity impact, who's actually to blame? If people's standard of living is not rising as fast as it was before, who's to blame? Sadly, we saw murders carried out by Nazis in Germany, which was known by the Secret Service that covered them up for the murder of the Turkish Muslim men that were murdered there. So we have had a problem, an ongoing problem. The polarization is good in one sense. The majority of people are opposed to the racist, are opposed to the Islamophobes, and we can break them. We broke the English Defence League, and we also broke the British National Party by mobilising the majority of people of good faith, if you like, who understand the dangers of allowing these organisations to grow and flourish. So the key to it is to make sure that all the people of good faith and of good mind come together to oppose the racist and the fascist. If we do that, we can beat them every time.
Now, politically speaking, Weyman, how will the growing tide of support for the Pegida movement change and affect Germany's political arena? I mean, do you expect to see more far-right groups gaining seats in Parliament?
I do think that's the case. Sadly, if you remember 2 years ago, Angela Merkel and David Cameron said that multiculturalism doesn't work. I think they were playing with fire. And they started that fire. And unfortunately for them, people like UKIP and this Pegida movement, they take it a step further by saying, why don't we blame these people for that? Now, the danger of having these people inside Parliament, as people like Reckless or any other like UKIP, they begin to legitimise racist ideas, Islamophobic ideas, and then thugs onto the street take that further, as inside, you've seen inside Sweden, where they're blaming immigrants there as well, and you start to see the burning down or the attempt to burn down mosques, as you've seen in Britain, actually. Muswell Hill Mosque was burnt to the ground by EDL members, and we think that though you see people going to Parliament, you see it expressed on the streets, and sadly you see it in thuggish and racist attacks.
Now, again, once again, returning back to the Pegida movement in Germany, I mean, do you think that the group may be misrepresented? I mean, since their so-called agenda is against extremist Muslims who endorse, for example, Sharia police and the rise in radicalization from Islamic preachers. Do you see them as being misrepresented?
Well, if you remember, in this country, the English Defence League, which was linked to those organisations were very small there, but they were supported by the Pegida movement there, they said the same thing. But reality is they're against all Muslims. They are attributing Muslims, the problems of German society, onto Muslims. And to be honest, it is no longer respectable to blame Jewish groups in the way that they used anti-Semitism in the 1930s. It's become respectable to blame Muslims. If you look at the Protocols of Elder, the Zionist Protocols of Elder that was so called, which was a fictitious document by Holocaust deniers, that's been used in the same way, but actually they've just taken out the word Jewish community and replaced it with a Muslim community. The new scapegoats of Europe are the Muslim community. And I think we've got to be very clear to remember how that ended up. They originally, people remembered that the Nazis argued there was just too much Jewish influence in Germany. And then it ended up in the gas chambers. We've got to be very clear when people falsely label people or say that we're only against a minority of people. That's how it starts. It's not how it ends up. So we've got to be very clear that we have to stop these people while they're small and don't allow them to become part of the body politic of Europe, of Germany, of anywhere.
We're just going to have to leave it there, Mr. Bennet. Political activist Weyman Bennet, thank you very much for your time. Thank you.